Good morning. It's Wednesday. I am going to be doing a couple of vintage Christmas ornaments. I got these in a package that came from my old house, and they're broken. They have the tops broken and all of that stuff. So I'm going to put the tops on them, but let me just explain to you what I've done in preparation for this. I have taken some masking fluid and I tinted it. That is, I just poured a little bit of my masking fluid into this cup and I put a few drops of cobalt blue and let it drip down the side and stirred it in. So that tints it so that I can see what I'm doing. And I think personally that it's a lot easier to see where you're putting your masking fluid if it's colored. It's very hard white on white to see where you're putting your masking fluid. Now I've already masked a few things here, and you'll notice that I put a little bit of shading on the lower part of this ornament here. So I wet the whole thing and I put a little bit of color in here. I think it was raw sienna. I dulled it down, I think, with a little bit of Payne's gray, but I just wanted to put a little bit of shadow in there, because when I do this glittery stuff that's on top, and as the ball comes down, well, of course, the glittery stuff is also going to fall into shadow. I think you can see that probably on the camera. So I want that to show up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brush. Now, a lot of people will use a really nasty, cheap brush for masking fluid. This is the brush I'm using. All right, so it's got, where is it? It's got a pretty good point. So I'm actually using a pretty good brush, and I'm going to soap it up. And I'm putting the soap in it because it acts a bit like, barrier cream that you put on your hands. And that sort of repels or keeps the masking fluid from sticking to the bristles. So it'll allow you to paint it on nicely but not ruin your brush. However, if you do ruin your brush, or if it dries and gets hard in your brush, you can get it out with a product called Goo Gone. So here's my reference picture here. And what I'm going to do is, instead of just painting circles, I'm going to dabble them on. And the reason I want to dabble them on, because these are like, these little decorations are like crystals. And they kind of raise up like big granules of salt. You know how big granules of salt, and they actually stick up from the ornament. So I'm kind of dabbling this on, and by dabbling it on, first of all, it gives me a more irregular edge, but it'll give me little tiny holes in here too, where it's not full coverage. Those little crystal-y things have spaces in them, so some of the ornament will show through. I'm also thinking that when I paint this, I might change this to a red ornament. I'm thinking about it, and I might do that. I can easily change it to a red ornament. All I need to remember is that if I do, I just follow all the same values as if it were green. So I'm working from my photo. I could work from the ornaments because I have them right here, but I'm working from the photo because that way you'll be able to see exactly the same perspective that I'm looking at, because otherwise you're looking down on my paper and I'd be looking across the table at the ornaments. So just to make it a little less confusing, I am painting from my photo here. So I'm dabbling a lot of this on. My goal here is to be finished before 11 o'clock because, of course, it's Remembrance Day, Memorial Day in the U.S., and I want to be done before that. So there's actually a few that sort of run along the edge here as well. It's very small, and that's why I like a small brush for this, because you know, it allows me to get little tiny spaces like that little spot right there. So I just rinsed my brush. I'm going to put some more soap on it. So I just keep my soap handy, and it doesn't have to be any special type of soap. It can be, you know, liquid soap. It could be a bar soap, you know. I don't know if you ever save those little hotel bar soaps. But they're good to put into your paint kit. All right, so this is pretty speckly up here. And I'm just going to keep coming down until I get all of these teardrop shapes put in here. Try to keep them as small as I can. But they don't need to be all consistent either. It's more filled in than it is not. So by dabbling it on, I'm still trying to cover most of it, because you know these little decorations are pretty strong, but they only have little gaps between some of the little crystals. So I'm dabbling. See if I can speed it up a little bit here. Now, I'm not putting this on really thick or anything, so this isn't going to take very long to dry. I'll start working on the ornament on the left while these little bits of masking fluid are drying. I had already put some here in the middle. That's this highlight in the middle of the ornament here from our light source. But this is going to allow me to paint this freely without you know, trying to paint around these shapes. So there'll be only a few little gaps left by the time I dabble all of this on here. Going to be a little bit of a different Christmas this year with the pandemic, but it'll be a little quieter. If I start to feel a buildup of masking fluid in my brush, I'm rinsing it out and just re-soaping and continuing on. This type of decoration, I think these kind of three-dimensional, these look like they're hand done. Like they're not in a pattern that is precise. So I think they're all hand done back in those days. I don't know how old these are. They probably belong to my grandmother. Hard to be thinking about Christmas. We've had some fantastic weather here in southern Ontario the last week or so. Just almost summer-like weather. It's just been unbelievable for mid-November. But it won't last, and pretty soon we'll be shoveling. So enjoy it while we can, right? This, by the way, I will share it to my Facebook page as well afterwards, so that you can access it if you miss any parts of it, or if you get phone calls in the middle, or whatever the case may be. So I'll record this and it'll go on my Facebook Live, or my Facebook page rather, which is shelleypryorfineart.com. No, that's my website. Sorry, facebook.com/shelleypryorfineart. I'm thinking as I put this on here that I've probably put this shading on way too light, which means I'll have to come back in again later, I think, to darken some of this, but it'll be a start anyway. The thing is, when you take off masking fluid, it usually will lift a little color with it as well. So you almost have to exaggerate if you're going to put color underneath your masking fluid. And if you're putting masking fluid on paper or on top of something that you've painted, you must make sure that whatever's underneath is 100% dry before you put masking fluid on top. Otherwise, your masking fluid may never come off. It becomes one with the paper and you'll never get it off. Okay, so this takes a little patience to do this, but I think the result is worth it. Almost there. Better to cover more than too little, because if you get the background color in here, you cannot get this design back. So you need to make sure that you're covering most of this, not leaving too many gaps between. So I'm just slapping on a few more bigger blobs of the masking fluid just to make sure that I'm not leaving too many gaps in here. Okay, so that's pretty good. I'm going to set that aside. I pretty much have everything masked now. Got water drip in there. Okay, so when I look at my reference here, I am seeing, it's very subtle, but there's a little bit of shading on the light parts of these, three little cylinders. Three little, these three donut type shapes here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a larger brush here, and I'm just going to wet this ornament, staying within my lines. Clean water here, large brush. I'm using, this is B12 round. So I'm going to put in Let's do the top part there too. Now I'm going to take that same dirty raw sienna with just a little speck of Payne's gray in it, just enough to dull it down. Don't want a bright color here. I just want to, but I want these to look vintage. I mean, the whole point of this is getting the vintage. I'm not worrying if it bleeds into the areas where there's going to be, you know, these greens and that sort of thing, or the red. I won't be worrying about that. I really just want to try to get an edge established on this. Those areas will ultimately be darker, so it won't matter. Okay, so pretty much just getting some nice edges going here. I am leaving some areas of just clean water though. You'll notice that. And I can always, you know, if I want to, I could always lift color out, but I think I'm okay. I don't think I need to do that. I'm gonna get this little bit up here too. That was the silver part I touched, not the ornament, but that's fine. That's going to be darker anyway. All right. So I think at this point, I'm just going to give it a really, really quick blow dry. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to start putting some color and some shading on this ornament. That's enough to keep, that was just enough blow drying to keep that from moving. So now I want to come in with some colors, and I'll show you on the actual ornament here. So we have this green color in here, and then there's a red color down in here. So I've already masked off highlights. That's going to save me some time. So I'm going to go into I'm going to use alizarin crimson, permanent alizarin crimson for the first band. Now I want to keep this first layer fairly transparent, so I'm thinning down my color and getting it, you know, quite fluid here. I don't want to hit really heavy color on here right off the bat. It will be, it'll give me no room to go for my shadows, so I want to make sure that I'm keeping some areas where I can get darker with shadows. So I'm painting this on, and I'm going to also try to get some variation in this as well. So for example, I'm going to rinse my brush, and before this dries, I'm going to paint some clean water in this little section here. And then when that color will start melting into there, but it will be lighter, so it'll transition. So I want to do the same sort of thing over here. It gets a little bit lighter, so I'm going to paint clean water here. Well, it just didn't stay clean. It bled in, which is what I actually wanted to do. And then I'll come in with my regular paint to finish painting in this band. Okay, so I think I've gone too far here. Yeah, okay. I'm just going to blot this little bit off because I didn't draw a line there, so I should have. And so I'm just going to soften that and blot it, and that will be just fine. All right, so on to my green one. Now this green is not a, well, In the photo it looks a little bit bluish green, but here it looks like a little bit of a, I'm gonna go with Hooker's Green Dark here. A little bit more of a bluish green. All right, so I'm coming up here to this other section. Now these two don't touch, so I'm able to quite easily work these together. And there will be darks coming in here as well, so don't need to worry too much. I'll go a little bit lighter right here. That's lighter by adding clean water. And then a little bit darker again as it gets over to this side right here. Just touching a little bit of extra dark in a couple of places. There's a very narrow band up here that's very light, so I'm going to put a little bit in there. And when you're painting glass and ornaments and things like that, it really boils down to a lot of abstract shapes because, you know, everything gets distorted when an object is round and it's reflective. So everything gets distorted. Clean water, this part. Then back to more color. And just going to go into this section right here because a lot of this is going to end up being really dark on top, so I can just pretty much paint the whole thing, but I'm just going to fade it. Just clean brush, blotted so it doesn't create blossoms, right? So if you come in with a really wet brush and something's not as wet, you push on it. Like the wet that you put down will push against the dry spot and create a blossom, which blossoms can be very nice in your painting. I think that they're quite lovely at times, but if that's not your goal, well then that's what you need to be doing is drying off your brush and making sure that it's not too wet when you're working into damp surface. Okay, so my masking fluid over here is dry now, and I think I want to do a red ornament here. I could do something completely different and do a blue one, but I think I'm going to do red because red and green, very, very retro. You know, if you're doing vintage, you don't want to start getting fancy about it. So basically I'm going to paint the whole thing. This is, I'm filling up my brush with color here. Let's get a bigger puddle going with nice runny paint because what I'm looking at here is the lightest value that I see in here, which would be around this light, okay? Or even perhaps down here. I could go as dark as that. And so I'm going to come in and paint. Got a little on my background, it splashed. Getting that round shape is the trick. Now I am working on dry, but if you were working on this, you could quite easily work on dry, on wet. Now I'm just going around this with water. Now my brush had a little bit of color in it, so that's fine. But you'll see that what'll happen as I come around and start painting and this color meets this, it will fade. Just like, kind of like what we did over here. So it'll be lighter around that highlight. Very important to keep all of these edges wet. Otherwise, you get hard edges forming and you will not have a smooth ornament. All right, so let's get these two touching. All right, so you can see I'm left with a much lighter ring around that bright light. But I have to keep babysitting all of these edges or they're going to get dry and then I'll be in trouble. So the key here is making sure you've got lots of paint ready. You are using a large brush that is filled right up. If the area is not overly large, I generally will work on dry. Because I find that when you work on wet, your colors always end up so much more diluted when it dries. It's never quite as, you know, lively. Yes, I think I like this ornament being red rather than the green. Okay, so while this is wet, I'm going to come in and I'm going to darken up some of my permanent rose, or sorry, alizarin crimson, and I'm putting a touch of Payne's Gray into it to dull it down. To give me a darker version of this. Now I want to put this in while it's wet. And you see it's a much darker color. And I'm doing it while it's wet so that everything will soften and meld. Because you'll see this is kind of a satiny finish on this ornament. It's not glossy like this one. So this one actually has a bit of a duller finish. So that's why the highlight isn't as brilliant either. I think I'm going to put just a touch more Payne's Gray into this and get these edges just, yeah, add a little bit more drama, because by the time it dries, it will not be nearly as dark as it seems. All right, so down here there's lots of mottling. It's partly because of the age of the ornament, I think. It's some of this mottling, but I like it, so I'm going to put it in. Try to establish something of a actual circle here. Got to make sure that first layer is still really wet, or you can't accomplish this. There's a bit of a highlight there on the stem part, so I'll leave a little gap there. Okay, so I see right here, this spot got a little bit dry. I'm not going to worry about it because what I'm going to do is rinse my brush, blot it well. And I'm going to tickle the edges of this, and that's going to soften it up. All right, so it looks like it was softened. Rinse and blot, and I can soften this. And see, I can keep at this for a short while, not a long while, but I can keep at it for a little while, as long as I've worked my first layers nice and wet. Now, I do believe I'm going to do another layer on this with just a bit of Payne's Gray. Now, Payne's Gray will be very dark, but everything is still wet. As long as it is, I can keep going. By the way, I am working the size that I'm working right now is approximately 8 by 10. I'm working on Arches 140-pound cold pressed paper. I am using inexpensive synthetic brushes, and if you want, after the video gets posted, I can post the link to where I got them on Amazon. They're actually travel brushes, but I find I use them all the time. They seem to keep a pretty good point. All right, so finding some places where I can get a little extra dark in here, because these darks will make a difference. Now this area, I can tell just by looking at it, there's no shine left on it. I don't think I'm going to play in that area right now. I'm going to come back to that one. Meanwhile, I'm going to lift out this highlight, which seems to be wanting to fill in. So I've rinsed my brush, and I've blotted it. And I'm just using my brush to drink up a little shine on that stem. So it's pulling up the color. But you do need to make sure that your brush is actually thirsty, not wet. So you'll see I'm actually pinching it, and that's making that spot quite dry. Yeah, no more touching. It's going to end up being blotchy, so I need to leave that one alone. I'm going to come back over to my original ornament, and I'm going to use just I think a little bit of just Payne's Gray. Let's just keep this simple. We'll use Payne's Gray. I may switch to my number 8 round for this. Just it's a little smaller. I'm not trying to cover as big an area, so I'm moving to a smaller brush. And I'm going to be also, like I did here, I'll be putting some areas in with just clean water and some areas just with the Payne's Gray. So I'm putting in kind of a mid-value of the Payne's Gray to start with. And then into that I'll drop some darker Payne's Gray. What a nice point I was able to get with this cheap little brush. Kind of nice. Have to watch I don't put my hand in wet paint though. Okay, right over here, I'm going to use clean water to fill in this space, and as soon as I touch those edges, they will soften, provided those edges are still wet. So timing is very important. You know, you do need to work while things are wet. I'm going to put a little bit of color in here. All right, so now I'm going to take a bit of Payne's Gray that's a little bit less diluted, so a little more creamy. And I'm going to come in and touch in a few darks. Places where I see that it should be nice and dark, I'm going to touch in just a little bit on my brush. Now my brush is not as wet as when I'm trying to blend, you know, like get everything nice and soft. It's not as wet as that, because otherwise this would fill in. There's a few unusual shapes here, and I'm just observing the abstraction that I'm seeing in my photo, because they are very abstract. Now there's masking fluid. No, there's not. But that's going to be a very dark area. We'll go right into there. There's a few little hints of green in this section, which is, again, more of that very strange abstraction that happens. Especially since you have a circle reflecting in a shape that's not circular, but sort of circular, and you get this really weird patterning. So I'm just trying to find my way through that. It doesn't have to be just like the photo. I'm not trying to paint a photo, I'm trying to paint a painting. Okay, so I'll have to come in with even darker paints after that gets a little bit dry, but I'm going to move down to the next section. So again, I'm going to start with my kind of my mid value, I guess, on this, or fairly light actually, this one. Keeping all the masking fluid on there is going to help. I've just noticed that I've got a little bit of green in this section here, but it's very soft, so I'm going to put this in here while this is still wet. This was Hooker's Green Dark that I'm using for this. I'm using Da Vinci paints. Okay, now coming down into this red, and we have to be careful that this green doesn't start coming into this red. So the red is dry, so I don't have any fears of that. But if you tried to do these side by side while they were wet, you're going to get an ugly color. So this is, I'm back to my Payne's Gray here. Ah, you know what? I just realized something. That green is a reflection of the ornament, which is no longer green, it's red. So if you make adjustments to your painting, you've got to think it through, right? So I'm going to lift this off before it gets really established. I'm just going to lift that off. Blot, water, blot. Okay, so I'm going to leave that alone, and when that dries, I will come in and I will add in my red. I'm just adding a little more of the Payne's gray in here. If I touch it in, you know, the rich color that I put in, if I just touch it in along the edges, then I get this, you know, sort of lightened area in the middle. So this gets quite dark over here. I'm trying to watch my time. And it gets pretty dark down in here. Okay. Get this softer. If you see a hard edge setting up, just blot your brush and hit it with a thirsty, like a damp brush, and you can usually soften those things. Okay, so that's coming along okay. And the last little section here, still working with Payne's gray. Now I won't make the same mistake twice. This one's going to be red, like my ornament here. A little too wet. All right, and surrounding that is more Payne's gray. Now I know I just made a tangent there. Probably could have overlapped these, but I didn't do that. So something to keep in mind. I kind of had to have them propped like that because it kept rolling off the table. But I didn't have to draw it that way, so that's what I'm saying. If you have a tangent, and if you don't know what a tangent is, it's an area like this where two things sort of just touch and create kind of an X. You see an X there, and you know, they touch, and that causes visual friction. Now the good thing is that when I put a background in here, it's really dark in here, so that will kind of get rid of that. So that's going to solve that design issue. Just going to re-wet this little section here so that I can drop in a little bit more panes around the outer sides, outer edges of this. I will not be painting in the reflection of me taking the picture, which is right in this little spot here. Okay, I'm going to paint now. Even though my ornaments don't have the little tops on them, I had a couple that did have the tops, so I duplicated what that would look like on my painting. And just want to erase a line here because I drew it and I made it too short at first. I can find my little eraser. Okay, can't find my little one. I'm going to use my bigger one. So, light Payne's gray here. I have masked highlights on the little caps. So I'm just using the point of my number 8 round. The caps have a bit of shine, so I have masked a couple of areas where there would be highlights. The light's coming from the left side, so the highlights are on the left. All right, so now I'm going to come in and start putting in a little bit more color. And if it doesn't blend as I want it to, I will rinse my brush and help it along. Just a little tickle. These were even a little bit rusty. If I wanted to, I could even put a little rusty color on there. That would be kind of neat. But I won't do that today just because of the time. Well, no, I could do that. This one needs a little bit more contrast because it's a little shinier. Now, I probably am going to come in and put another layer of water on this, just clean water on this when it's drier. Currently, it's not dry enough for me to do that, but when it's dry enough, I could come in, re-wet the whole thing, and continue adding some of those Payne's grays to make the darks even darker, to give more shape and volume to this ornament. I'm going to blow dry this really quick, just because I want to get a background in here and the shadows, because you'll see that the shadows will make a big difference as well. So I'm going to quickly blow dry this, remove some, and then I think what I need to do before the background though is to, I'm going to get this masking fluid off so that I can show you what to do with those little bits. Sorry for the noise. Okay, so I'm going to use my large brush to re-wet this. Get some more darks in there. I'm going to go right through this too. It's okay if it blends a little bit. That just makes all the first layer that wasn't perfect even smoother. So always when watercolor dries, it always looks lighter. So when it comes to glass and metal and pretty much anything reflective, you're going to have an exaggerated contrast to really give the illusion of that shine, because that's what we're doing. We're painting an illusion here. So this is just Payne's gray. Some of that, it's not like solid right out of the tube Payne's gray, but it's, you know, pretty intense Payne's gray. And concentrating here. And so I'm coming in, and this is going to soften and melt into that wet surface. I don't know, it could be a little wetter. Let's wet that a little bit more. The first bit of water I put in drank in pretty quick, probably because I had just blow dried it. It was warm. Okay, so I can soften these edges, just like I was softening the smaller edges over here. I can do the same thing on the big one. That'll work. And it might feel like it's turning into a black ornament, and it's going to dry a lot lighter than this. The red will still come through. But I can start transitioning more into red as I get away from some of these darkest shadows though. So my red, this is my red and Payne's gray combination. Permanent rose, I should say. No, sorry, I keep saying permanent rose. It's alizarin crimson I'm using. Okay, I'm going to leave it be, add a couple more darks, blow dry, and then I'm taking this off. Let's take some of the excess blobs off of my masking fluid, because when the blow dryer pushes the air, we don't want those little beads of paint, which will take longer to dry because they're not on an absorbent surface. We don't want those scooting across the page and making little mini blossoms. I think I'm just, before I call her quits, I'm going to put a little bit more red around this halo from the light, just to make it a little bit more red. Soften in the edges with a dampened brush. There we go. So that's nice and gradual. And I think I need to wrap this up, just because I'm looking at the time and everybody will be tuning in for the ceremonies. But I will post the finish. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a few more darks in here. I will wet my background, drop in Payne's Gray for my background and my shadows. That'll all be done wet on wet to keep everything soft. Okay, so I'm going to sign off, and I hope you all take a moment of silence to remember all of the people that have sacrificed for our freedom, and hope you have a great week. Take care. Bye.